Okay, hey everybody, happy Friday. It is March 27th, it's 3 p.m., and it's time for Ask an Architect. I'm really excited to have you guys joining us. I want to say hello to everybody on Zoom who's on the webinar today, and also hi to everybody streaming from YouTube Live. I think we figured out how to how to get that working again this time. So very excited to have you guys on. I've got Rich Bodrick from our team here at Baldwin Architectural Group, and we're going to go ahead and get kicked off so we can let you start enjoying your weekend. Today, we're actually going to be covering part two of our building process series. Last week, we covered the first phase and building projects, which was about schematic and discovery process, part one. Today, we're jumping right into the second part of most architectural building projects, and we call this design and development. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. Everybody's been muted as they came in, except for myself and Rich, so that we can speak clearly and not have any background noise, but we do want questions. So the way to ask questions along the way, if you think of anything you'd like us to know or respond to, please use the chat window. You can raise your hand if you'd like attention that way, or you can just simply chat in the chat box right there on Zoom. You can also do that on YouTube Live. Towards the end, I'll be checking for comments and questions. If we do get any good questions, we'll make sure that we read them out loud for everybody to hear. We would love for y'all to have some participation with us. Before we get started, though, one quick thing I did want to welcome a special guest. We have Clay Hamlin with us from MSI. We asked them to join us, and they are a general contractor we're starting to partner with and get to know a little bit better. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Clay Hamlin and his team from MSI coming to join us today. So we're very glad to have them on board talking with us. With all of that said, we'll have some announcements towards the end, but we'll go ahead and get started. So Rich and I are your hosts. Rich is joining me. He is a graduate from Tuskegee University in Alabama, where he got his bachelor's in architecture. He's been with us for a little over 4 years now, and we're glad to have him. Rich, you want to say hi?
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Ready to get started?
Yeah. Rich, thanks for joining us. Rich is going to be answering the questions that I bring up along the way. So uh, he's been on our panel before, and we're really proud to have him on our team. So he does a lot of the scoping of these projects and actually does a lot of the design work. So Rich is a very valuable member of our team. We're glad to have him. So before we get into the questions for the Ask an Architect, wanted to kind of revisit a little bit of our process. So how do people start the process when they work with Baldwin Architectural Group on an architecture project? It really does start simply enough with a dream, meaning the people who we work best with, the people who get the best results from working with us, are people who have a dream, some kind of a vision for a better future, meaning they've got some kind of a project in mind that they really have their heart into. They've got a path that they want to see that they're able to take. They have some kind of an idea or a vision that they come to us with. Those are the best projects that we can take on, not folks who are chasing a quick buck or chasing unrealistic expectations, but folks who are really looking for some kind of a project that gets them excited, gets them out of bed in the morning. We take that dream and we start putting reality to it. We start designing it. We start putting actual deliverables in place. We tell them what is possible within their budget. It starts with that dream, but then it starts to become reality by engaging with us and starting to find out what the next step is to get going. This is a review too from our previous week, just for those who weren't with us. This is what our design process looks like with Baldwin Architectural Group. So we always go through as much as we can. We always try to stay as close to this three-phased approach. Last week we covered the discovery process, which includes site visits and site plans. We start taking an inventory of what's existing, floor plans, elevations, and roof plans, and we start to get some schematics. By the time we get into this phase that we're going to be talking about today, phase two, that's really where stuff gets to start getting really exciting. That's when we actually start putting out concepts and proposals, start going back and forth with our clients on ideas, and really fleshing out the project. So it's more than just that dream and that idea, but actually starts to take on a life. By the time we get to phase three, we should be getting close to delivering construction documents. But this is kind of a bird's eye view on what our design process looks like. And then we also always have a scope of work. So Rich, tell us a little bit about a scope of work. I've put some um, descriptions here of why we do a scope of work, but tell us a little bit about what a typical scope of work has in it.
So the typical scope of work usually involves that wish list that I don't know if everybody was here in the previous webinar, but we usually have a wish list where we nail down what can actually be done, and that get us, to fully grasp the concept of what you're trying to create. So,
Right. Yeah, and during the scope of work, we start ironing out from what that wish list looks like into what can be done, the kind of the what we want and what we need to have. We start to set expectations for both the person that we're engaged with, our client or our contractors, but also what we're going to be delivering. So scope of work really puts a map out
right,
in front of the customer and us so that they know what to expect from us. We also put in a predictable cost, meaning when we produce a scope of work, it does have a cost of what that engagement is going to look like between our client, ourselves, and we do that so there's no surprises. We don't nickel and dime. We don't look for opportunities to add to that cost. We really keep to that scope, unless we go outside of scope, we do not add cost
right.
to a scope of work. Rich, tell us about establishing deadlines. Why is that so important in a scope of work?
Okay, establishing deadlines is very valuable because we don't want to drag this process along. We want to have a ideal goal in mind that we can all reach at a reasonable pace. So that's the vital when it comes to drawing out. That's how we gather, uh, get. That's how we put together the quote
Right.
to determine how long it takes to get the job done.
Yeah. So when you guys see a scope of work from us, it's very important that we agree on deadlines. That's a very important part of the process. If you're ever going to work with an architect, with a contractor, with anybody on a building process, it's very important to establish deadlines, meaning a due date. So sometimes we don't hit due dates. Sometimes things happen. The last 2 weeks have taught us that unexpected things can happen. However, clear upfront communication is how we establish deadlines. So even when a deadline moves, it's very important. We want to educate our clients to always ask for deadlines when they're looking at any kind of a building contractor.
Yeah,
Whether
there's
it
only
be
so much you can actually account for before we start actually doing the work. So
right.
it's vital to have that.
So as far as our Ask an Architect, we're going to start getting to our Q&A. Here's some of the questions that we got before the webinar, some that were submitted. So Rich, we were looking at the deliverables in phase two on the development. We see a lot of where it says proposed floor plans, proposed elevations, proposed roof plan. What do we mean? What does that language mean when we say proposed?
So at this point of the process, when we say propose, that means we pretty much know ideally what you want, and we're proposing what it will look like as it's being constructed on the site. So, exactly, it's proposed site plan, proposed elevations, all the areas that are important to you and plus the city officials.
Right. So when we get to the stage where we're just talking about proposal, Rich, what you're telling me is that we should have gotten enough information. We should have collaborated pretty well with our client to this point that we can
Right.
start putting on paper what a proposed plan is going to look like. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Right. So when we have proposed floor plans, proposed elevations, we're starting to flesh out on paper, so to speak, because we do everything digitally,
Right.
but we start to put a visual representation together of here's what this concept should actually look like. Now, what do we do there, Rich, if somebody comes back and says, this isn't really what I'm looking for, or I need to tweak this or tweak that? What do we do in terms of revisions at this stage?
Typically, we offer 3 revisions. Uh, that way, we can flush out all the items because usually our goal is to hit it the first revision, but realistically,
Yeah,
that doesn't happen that often. But usually by the second revision is where we want to hone in on any little big changes, any changes you will have.
right.
Right,
Yeah, because it is a proposal, so and it's part of the creative process, right? So
right,
realistically, we've got us. It's almost like a police sketch, right? If somebody came in and trying to describe the suspect, and then the sketch artist is going to draw it up to the best of their description and their memory. I
right.
kind of think about it that way with us as architects, is that we have a client that's sitting down and saying, "Here's what I want. Here's my dream. Here's my idea, my vision." Here's how I want it to look. And then we start to propose to them, here's how we think what you're describing to us should look, and what it's capable of looking like.
Yeah, and like how the structure will affect what you're trying to
Right.
make. Yeah.
And so, Rich, you're saying when we have those client revisions, we always accommodate that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Um, Especially like I said, once we already have a pretty solid idea at that point of what you want the layout, but usually the client doesn't anticipate how the structure will affect the layout.
Right.
So that's another aspect we want to nail down in this phase.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is a very important part of the development. This is not just developing, the actual building at this point, but we're developing the ideas into what the plan should look like, so that we're on the same page. We run that by the client. We get input. We get feedback, and we make the tweaks along the way. But we keep that tight within our scope of work, so that we're not exhausting ourselves chasing a
Right.
dream. If we've done our job well, we've asked good questions at this point to understand what the vision looks like. So,
Right.
and then what all happens during the development phase? So, Rich, even just from a bird's eye view, I guess describe the development phase. Phase two of a architectural design project. What all happens? What all's going into this project at this point?
At this point, another thing we like to do is get other engineers involved.
Uh
Like,
huh.
and depending on which engineer that you need, we usually contact the engineers. We have a preliminary plans already created, and in a lot of cases, we like to send it out to the right person if you need them. Um,
Why do
yeah,
we why do we get engineers involved at this point?
because for one, it shrinks that timeline
Hmm.
down. For one, and it's better to get them involved early rather than later,
Right.
and you get hit with a sticker shocker on the price. So that way, we like to incorporate that early.
Right. So, yeah, and what we'll find is during the development phase, especially when we're getting into proposed ideas and concepts, we can dream a mile high and a mile wide, but an engineer is going to tell us what can actually be done.
Right.
So that's another big reason why I'm glad you brought that up, Rich, as far as getting engineers involved at this stage, because we rely on them to tell us what can and cannot be done. Just because we uh, dreamed it up doesn't necessarily mean it can be built. So we do work with an engineer to say, is this design feasible? Do we have, excuse me, there we go. Oh, yeah, sorry, hit the button there. What we've designed, is it feasible? Will it stand? Will it actually get built from how we're proposing it? So that's very important to point out, Rich, that we do want engineers involved early. What else happens during the development phase that you can think of?
Another thing, like I said, other than nailing down the dreams of the client, a lot of another aspect we like to do is kind of prepare this phase for the construction documents.
Right.
Yeah, keyword prep.
Right.
Because in a lot of cases, it's a lot of details that's involved in this process.
Yeah.
So, the quicker we get to that point of the project, the faster it will just make everything.
Yeah. So I think there is one of my questions is, yeah, I'll go ahead and skip to this since you brought it up. How does this help us prepare those construction documents? So, what you're talking about for folks who are just joining us, when we talk about construction documents, that's a stamp set of architectural drawings. That's what that means. That's something that's taken to be reviewed and hopefully approved for construction. So what do we do, Rich, at this phase during the development that gets us in a better place to have prepared construction documents?
Okay, like for example, on a commercial project where we have to prepare the plans um, with ADA details, we have to point out certain locations and prepare for certain areas that will come up in the city. You know, when you have the right ramp length or have certain a radius for a wheelchair to access a bathroom or a space or anywhere in the building, really. So things like that, we prep it or prepare those type of details for the client or inform the client that this will be brought up. This is important to have.
Right.
Um, and it goes the same way for residential. Any details that may come up and or in, this an important factor or for you to understand like how many doors and windows you will have in this design. Things like that we have to bring together in order to prepare for construction documents to move this process along.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because there are things that, and that's what we work hard to do, is to anticipate what could be. I don't want to say a challenge because yeah, ADA is something that's always going to be a part of life. We need to, we have regulations for how
Right.
buildings need to be built, but sometimes we don't think about that while we're dreaming. Sometimes we don't think about what it's going to take to actually make something happen until until we're at
Right.
that bridge. So we're trying our what we're doing our best of every day is making sure that we're staying out in front of it, that we're anticipating those challenges or anticipating where a ramp should go, where handrails should go, what's actually going to add functionality to the building. So prepping the construction documents means getting them ready for review. What else do we do to make sure that we're preparing this project for submission as a construction document, Rich? Is there anything?
Another thing we do is this is another part of the process where we go look at the codes that that's govern that particular area, like zoning regulations. You know, different cities got different regulations in certain areas. It was a little chaotic. So,
Right.
yeah, so that is very important, like because it changes too frequently. So that's another thing we have to keep up to date and make sure all the codes align with the design you're trying to propose.
Right. That's a good. I'm glad you brought that up too, because codes, like you said, depending on which state you're in, which city you're in, which county you're in, which the governing authority is, you could have a different set of codes and are interpreted differently.
Right.
One thing that we also do at this stage, Rich, you mentioned engaging with engineers. Do we also? Is there anybody else that we might engage with as far as needing education on code review?
Um, Other than city officials, that's really it.
Okay.
Mostly city officials and engineers.
Okay. So yeah, at this stage, it's again, it's very important for us to get closer to that development process. So once we get into phase 3 from here, we're not chasing our tail. We're not, oh yeah, we forgot to think about the codes. Oh yeah, we forgot to think about ADA
Right.
requirements. Oh yeah, we forgot to think about, we're doing that here. And a good architect, for those listening, um, somebody who's leading the process for you, they're doing more than just drawing. A good architect is actually coaching you and guiding you and helping you understand what things mean. So if there is a complex code requirement for your restaurant or for your senior living facility, or if we need to make sure that there's a occupancy load requirement, or a fire marshal is going to, what are they going to bring up about this wall or that wall? A good architect's going to let you know about those things up front, so they're not surprises later when a plan gets reviewed by any civic organizer. And then we have to go back and start the process over and add length of time to the process and to the project. So that's something we try to strive to do a little bit differently as an architectural firm, is make sure that we're getting out in front of those things. Like Rich said, we're anticipating what codes might come up. We're anticipating what a planner might review or say during the review. Yes, so everybody's a little different, but if we keep a good dialogue with those people, and like Rich said, the codes change all the time. That's why we do a good job of knowing what the codes are and researching them before we start a project, and really do a good thorough review before we even take on the project. So there's a lot that goes into this. This is a really big question when we say, how does this prepare us for construction documents? There's a lot that we're doing behind the scenes that's beyond just drawing. I think that's a good takeaway for this slide. With that said, we're gonna have about 10 minutes. We're trying to keep this at about half an hour today. But I did want to read this quote I found as I was researching this topic, and I do think it's very apropos. We kind of try to live by this. If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing, and that's a big reason why we put together a process for the building design review or building design process. We put this into phases, and we put deadlines, and we put deliverables in place so that we have something to be that roadmap for that process. Because a good architect is not going to put you in a place where you're chasing your tail, doesn't have resources, doesn't have answers, doesn't guide you through the process. This was a quote from Edwards Deming. Of course, he was an engineer. Sounds exactly like something an engineer would say,
Yeah.
but a very famous guy who was also a published author and lecturer. And I loved this quote, though, and I think we've tried to live by that and put a good process in place with how we're doing things. Rich, is there anything else you would add to the process before we start taking questions? Anything you want our audience to know about this part of the design process?
Actually, it's something I forgot to mention when you're at the proposed slide.
Yeah, let me get there.
Proposed perspectives. I want to get something straight about that.
Oh yeah.
What we do in that phase, we like to present like a 3D representation of the building, because in a lot of cases, people they need a visual to understand what they're looking at, because not everybody can understand a floor plan or elevation. They need to see it how it will look if it's actually built. So what
Right.
we like to do is put together exterior and interior, depending on what we're working on and which particular project, but perspectives, so and color perspectives, so you can get a clear understanding of what we're building. But these are not renderings.
Right. What's the difference? Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. And Matic, thank you for joining us again from last week, and thank you for your question. We see that, and I'm going to get to that. But yeah, Rich, tell us the difference between a perspective and a 3D rendering, a little bit more detail.
Okay, a perspective. Yeah, like I said, it's just a simplified view, as if you were looking at the building if you were standing on the site.
Okay,
And
so like from a street view kind of thing.
yeah, street view or an interior view if you were standing in a room, just to get a good idea of of the space that we're building up.
Yeah, kind of put you in that place where you're looking at the finished building.
Right.
Okay.
And the rendering is essentially creating a realistic view of that same image, of that same perspective,
Right.
or whatever perspective you want.
Yeah.
But it's purely for marketing, and it's we can get it as beautiful as you would like it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and we've seen. I think I'm glad you brought that up. So perspectives are part of this process, and they're very important because it starts to take a floor plan and a proposed idea and elevations and all these other things that you know look really good on paper, and as much as it can, it kind of forces you to see what it would look like if you're standing in front of it or standing inside of it, and that helps kind of expand the imagination of what this project's going to look like once it's off the ground. A 3D rendering is a service that we do as well that Rich mentioned, and you mentioned marketing, and why you said that I think is because a 3D rendering will actually give us a little bit more fleshed out detail. And we do see a lot of our clients use it to get investments or get investors to get buy-in from they're pitching their own project idea to somebody who maybe it's a potential client of their own, or maybe it's a potential investor, or maybe it's potential partners that they're trying to bring in. But it does help give life to that vision, and that's a very important service. And we've seen a lot of people take us up on those 3D renderings to get like a flyover, a walkthrough. I do think it really kind of puts you in a really almost like a virtual reality kind of experience where you can see what that project's going to look like if you were actually visiting the site. So there's some cool things we can do in addition to these perspectives
Yeah,
that do help. But yeah, I'm glad you wanted to touch on the perspectives, because those are important for us to see.
right.
Anything else here, like building sections or elevations that we need to talk a little bit more about?
Um, I think we already touched on the elevations, but building sections essentially are just sections in certain critical areas
Yeah,
of the building where structure needs to be shown,
yeah.
and how the load path from the foundation to the top of the roof, how's that traveling?
Hmm.
So a lot of those details are shown in the building sections, and we like to give an idea to the client of what's important, what you need to watch out for.
Right. Perfect. Well, great. We got some other folks joining us. Thank you for coming in. I'm glad to have so many folks join us on late on a Friday. Thank you guys. We're going to open it up for questions. Rich, thank you so much. That's really helpful. We got some more questions for you here. Our good friend Maddock has joined us again. I'm going to read this question. If you're designing a proposal and have several different concepts for the project, so it sounds like a client who's got multiple ideas, how do
Okay.
you decide which one is to present to the client, or should you show them multiple potential proposals? So, Rich, do we do when we're doing proposals? Do we show them a sundry different types of proposals, or have we narrowed it down more so by the time we've gotten to phase two?
Um, you, all right. When you say proposal, are you saying like,
I think what Matic is asking is, do we develop multiple concepts? So
oh,
would we take
oh,
more than one concept and develop it into a set of proposals, or do we really just give them one proposal, one set of proposals at that point?
well, usually we develop um, several ideas because in a lot of cases where we have those meetings, that's why those discovery meetings are so important. We get a good idea of exactly the look that you want. So yes, we do give you several options um, to select from. But like I said, in the design development phase, at that point, we should already be pretty clear on
Yeah,
which one you
yeah.
want.
Yeah, I think the best, yeah, that's a great way to answer that is by this phase, Matic, typically we've wrestled. Sometimes we call it rumbling. It's not with each other, but it's kind of rumbling with ideas. And during that first phase that we talked a lot about last week, that's really kind of where we start hammering at different concepts to get the ones that we really like. So that by the time we're in here, which is the development process, we're really a lot more clear on the concept. So yeah, there may be some slight revisions, some tweaks, some changes,
Right.
but for the most part, we're on a path. We're not looking at three main concepts or two main big concepts. We've kind of narrowed it down. So you might have seen Christopher's response during the preliminary design phase. That's really, the first phase. That's really where we hammer away that. That's a great question, though, Matic. I appreciate you asking that. I hope it
Yeah,
answers.
thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody else. I'd love to hear some more questions. Not that we don't appreciate Matic. Always, not always, but he's got a lot of questions. He's a good student here from the Ask an Architect. Clay asked, in a perfect world, quote unquote, at which point in the process do you prefer to engage with a general contractor? And he's tipping his hand because he is a general contractor, so he's wanting to know, when do we get involved?
Well, this is the phase.
Yeah,
This
tell us
is
about that.
where, yeah, this is the phase where usually we'll have we've spoken to the client. We pretty much know what they'll want.
Hmm.
So this is where we develop the building sections. some preliminary framing plans or foundation plans, just to send it to you. And that it'll really, in some cases, the client doesn't even get the contractor involved. But if we do have a contractor that's there, we love to get them involved early because it just makes everything easier.
Yeah, and I'd say that's a kind of a twofold answer, Clay. For what Rich is saying, yeah, we typically start to heavily involve the GC at this phase because that's where we're starting to make our development happen. But more often than not, we've picked a GC based on if we're in the driver's seat, so to speak, if we're the ones who have been tasked with partnering with the GC, if the client didn't bring one, or if the
Right.
GC didn't bring us the contract, we will typically find a GC that's a good fit for this project. And different contractors have different niches. Some of them love residential and they're great at that. Some of them are great with remodels. Some of them are great with restaurants and retail. So we do have different types of partnerships, but I would say before we even started designing, once we catch wind of a certain project, that's typically where we will reach out and find out if a good GC is available and interested in a project. So they're not, caught on their heels. We do that so there's plenty of warning up front, so to speak. There's plenty of time and runway to get engaged so that we're not asking a contractor to play catch up. But to Rich's point on phase two, that's when the GC has a bigger contribution to the actual project at that point. And Christopher had a clarifying statement here. By the way, Christopher is our lead architect, and he will be the one fielding these questions next week. So you'll get to hear from all three of our designers. But Christopher was saying here, we prefer having the contractor involved early, as we were saying, so they can understand both budget, and we don't want to shock a client. So it's important to note that, yeah, Clay, we do try to get you in early, but the active role really starts to take off here at phase two. I hope that helps. That's a great question too, Clay. Thank you for asking that. I also see Colin from MSI join us. Colin, we're glad to have you here too. Um, and I see some folks who we met at our live event when we were back in the day when we were shaking hands with people and having drinks together in February.
So long ago.
That seems like a long time ago, but I see some people from that event are in our chat or in our webinar today. So welcome. If anybody else has a question, please type it into the chat window. Same on YouTube. I'm monitoring the YouTube chat right now. I see some folks in there. So if you guys have a question, please type it in. Love to see what you're thinking about and would like to know. So I'll give us about 30 seconds for anybody else to type in any questions that they might have. So these are great questions. I really appreciate you guys contributing today. And this is going to be recorded. So if you guys want to download a copy of it or rewatch this on YouTube later, it will be available here soon. So I'm not seeing any other questions. If they do pop up, I'm watching the group chat here on Zoom. Oh wait, Maddock, you got another one. I knew I could count on you. Yeah, we did mention getting engineers involved. What is the most common problems you run into with designs? So yeah, I guess some challenges maybe that come up during the design process. Christopher immediately jumped in with structural MEP, and civil. So all the types of engineers that we get involved with. Rich, what do you see are the most common challenges once we get engineers involved?
The most common challenges usually involve structural because that typically changes the design because
Ah,
it's vital.
okay.
And so if you're say for instance, if a client's trying to have a 25-foot span of clear space, and they just want it free with no columns, that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
That has to change, and we have to get creative there, and that's where the creativity come in. I kind of like the challenge
Yeah.
because that's where we get to figure out and still try to keep the look that the client wants, but
Hmm.
just make it as feasible as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. The challenge of once we do get those engineers involved in the process, we can't go very much farther if it's not going to stand, if the mechanical and the electrical and the plumbing is not going to work, or if it's not going to work with the site. So we try to get out in front of that, Matic. Let's see. Don't know if this question is answerable. Other such places to hide air ducts and such. I don't know if that's Rich is, he's asking about air ducts. Can we hide
Um,
them?
I mean, typically they like to hide it. Well, here's one situation that Christopher liked to uh, use. Say, for instance, if you go with open web floor joists, you could be able to run the ducts in between the joists. Yeah, see, I was already on it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, like that's a good place to hide it per se. Um, other than that, it gets pretty difficult to hide it unless you go with black ceilings with black ducts to hide it that way.
Yeah.
Some people like the open look. So
Yeah. Those are great questions. I'm going to start wrapping up here unless I see a really good one pop up before we wrap up here. But guys, thanks again. Great questions, Matic, Clay. Um, really glad to see everybody that joined us today, and thanks to those on YouTube as well. So if you do think of a good one before we wrap up, I will be checking. But I had a couple announcements as we hit our just over our half hour that we had intended for the Q&A today. So we got two things happening that we're really excited about. Yes, since we are dealing with a lot of kids staying home from school, Baltimore Architectural Group wanted to come up with a way for children, especially, to stay involved and stay creative and stay dreaming. And so this is something we're very, very excited about, is the Aspiring Architect Contest. So we have different, and I'm actually going to have to put the links here in the chat afterwards so that you guys can see it. But it's on our homepage. Aspiring Architect is very simple. We have 4 different age groups going up to 18. So whatever age group the child is in, they could win the best design for their age group, and they would get some cash, in the form of a gift card. Each child wins that design. All they got to do is design a building and submit it. They can email it to us, or they can submit it on social media with the hashtag Aspiring Architect. So check that out. We'd love to get, if you want to submit multiple projects. Yeah. Matic, are you a student? Is that why you're asking? Let's see what he says. I am a student. So, Matic, if you're under 18 and you're a student, we must have met you at Decatur High when we came out of
oh,
there.
okay.
So Matic, yes, you can. You can win your age group, and you can win the grand prize. So you can submit as many times as possible. We have no limit on how many submissions you can make. We will pick based on who has the best design for each category. We'll judge that for each age group, and then we'll announce winners hopefully in mid-April. But yeah, you can submit as many times as you want. Just hashtag it with hashtag Aspiring Architect, or email it to us. Same with seniors. Yeah, we'd love to see your submissions, Matic. You better get us some good ones.
Better.
Yeah, so SketchUp, Minecraft, clay, marshmallows, pencils, Lincoln Logs. I don't care what you do. Just build something and show it to us and tell us what it is, and we'll consider it. The grand prize is that you could have your design actually rendered into one of those 3D renderings that Rich was talking about. So you'd actually get to see your design take on life from a professional designer. It's a really cool prize. We do actually have cash to go with that too. So we're excited about it. The same with
Or any,
seniors.
or
Go ahead, Rich.
I
Go
just
ahead,
I,
Rich.
I was about to say, and you can select any site. Any site, we can build it up. We can render it in any location you want it. You want it in Italy? We can render it in
You're right.
Italy.
Yeah, we have the
Doesn't matter.
software to put it anywhere. So dream big, build something, and put it out there. Tell your friends. Matic over at Decatur. I know we've been talking to Mario and your instructor, Mr. Moore, and we're looking forward to a lot of submissions coming out of here. Same with seniors. We actually have a senior competition. So if you guys know anybody 65 and up, a lot of people who are in assisted living and in memory care and senior living right now are not receiving visitors that they can hug like they normally would. And so we wanted to do something fun for them too. And we're asking seniors to submit designs that represent some kind of memory from their life. So whether it was the home that they came home to when they first got married, the home that their children were raised in, a landmark from a honeymoon, or their office building, whatever it is, we want to see senior designs as well, and they will be able to win the same prize. They could win that cash prize and the best senior submission from a 65 and up. Christopher, you're not eligible to participate as a member of Baldwin Architectural Group, but if we get a submission from somebody who's 64, we'll round up and let them
I
be
don't know,
eligible to
Jack.
win.
I don't know, Jack. That's too young for me.
Yeah, well, I don't want to split hairs. We want people to have fun. That's the point of all of this. So check our website for, and this is Inspiring Architects. So if you know anybody who has a story from their lifetime that they'd like to share in the form of a building design, please let them know about this so they can email it to us, or they can share it on social media. If you need to help your loved one with social media, just use that hashtag, hashtag inspiring architect .com or .com. I don't know where I'm going with that. Yeah, use the hashtag and we'll be able to see those. So those are both on our website. I'll share the links out. So guys, again, we really appreciate it. This was fun. I love doing these. We're going to do it again next Friday, April 3rd. Christopher will be wrapping up this part of the series when we will talk about the grand prize, which is construction documents. What does that mean? What does that look like when we start finalizing construction documents? It's an exciting day, and we're going to go through what that process looks like. I've got one more chat here. What have I got? Thank you. Yeah, Matic, thank you for joining us. I do owe you a prize I have not forgotten about last week. And we will be getting you your gift card for participating. I have not forgotten about you. I think I need a mailing address to get it to you, and I can't remember if you emailed that to me or not. But thank you again, Matic. Have a great weekend. We're looking forward to your submissions. Guys, tell everybody you know about the Aspiring Architect, that's for children, and the Inspiring Architect, that's for seniors. We're looking forward to some cool designs. We will see you next Friday. We'll send out the announcements for the webinar and the YouTube Live at that time. Everybody stay healthy, keep washing your hands, and keep a safe distance, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.